Hello, everybody. This is Vicky Jeter representing Louisville Center for Spiritual Living with our Midweek Inspiration. And this week is really wonderful to have the opportunity to do because we had a special speaker on Sunday, Wendy Sharp, who did a presentation on fear versus love. And she had a PowerPoint with it that really has many resources and points to be made that I want to share with you. So I'm actually going to walk through the presentation that she did. My take on some of her points will be different than hers a little bit. Not actually the principle underlying them, but a little bit different perspective on certain things, which might actually enhance the whole picture between this video and her talk. And she actually did a synopsis of her talk in writing as the article for Carolyn's Corner in the newsletter, which went out yesterday. So I encourage you to check into LCSL's weekly update, if you got it on your email, and read Wendy's article, which dovetails to the presentation that I'm going to walk through now. And then also, absolutely, any questions you have, or if you want to talk about it, you can contact me at VICKY, B as in boy, J as in Jack, ETER @gmail.com. And if you were interested in connecting with Wendy, I'm sure we could do that as well. And so this will be the first time that I've put a shared screen on this particular video for the Midweek Inspiration. So, and I'm just saying that the process of the shared screen is a new adventure, and we will just see how this goes. So, fear versus love. They would appear to be opposing forces. Actually, they're not. And Wendy opened with letting us know that one of her inspirations for this talk, our previous music director, is a wonderful being named Kai Lee. He's a consummate musician, has many, many talents, and as a part of our community has blessed us in so many ways. And one of these ways for her is that at one time she heard him talking about this, and he said the opposite of love is not hate, it is fear. So the emotions of love and fear both have a huge biological component, and they're deeply, deeply wired because they're essential for our survival. And most everyone is aware there's a term for that with regard to how we react to fear in the body. It's called fight or flight, and that has to do with the adrenal system gearing up for our body to be able to affect what we need to have happen. And here's Shaz. All organisms have to identify threats in order to survive. And not only that, but survival depends on our being able to react quickly. We can't exactly take time to stop and think if we're going to do a reaction to save ourselves from a threat. And the part of our brain that does this is very primal. It is the first level of the brain and has been with us since time immemorial, and that's what she has. It's ancient. And today, the primal brain can either react or overreact. And this is because as sensory information comes in, there are multiple areas of the brain involved. And some of this is very technical, and that wasn't exactly her biggest focus, but we want to inform people at the same time as giving you the pearls that you can apply in your life. So there's the amygdala and the neocortex that work together. The amygdala is the emotional side, and the neocortex is where we then take our spontaneous emotions and add filters of reason and rationale to them to decide what we ultimately want to do if we can stop and make a choice. But the amygdala goes first because nature wants to be sure that if we need to jump out of a car coming at us, we don't stop and think, do I need to move or not? We just do it. That's just an example. And there is a difference between flight and fight. Flight is when we decide rather than confronting something, we just want to try to get away from it and run away. And fight is when we turn and decide to hit it head on. And such as this example here. In this example, he's running from the threat rather than turning to try to fight it, because his system knows if he turns to try to fight it, he's likely to lose. And so our brains have to balance and moderate between the filtering side, where we assess a situation, and the reactive side, where we just go with the most primal response. And this is where our distinction between what's actually happening and what we're being affected by past experiences, because every time we've gone through something in the past, it creates a pathway in the brain. And the more often we have experienced those feelings of confrontation or fear, the deeper those paths get entrenched, the deeper it goes into the primal brain. And so that's why it can seem so easy, even in a calm moment, when we say to ourselves, well, I'm not ever going to do that again because that didn't really serve me now. That's not what's actually happening now. Then when we feel that way again, we find ourselves tending to the same reaction. And there's a reason for that, because it's patterned. And so it's about how to catch those patterns and give ourselves the opportunity to make a more conscious choice. And so this is where we come into insecurity and self-doubt, because the feeling level is so powerful and it doesn't feel like we have a choice. And then there is dealing with the other people in the situation, and the people that represent other things that we've been through. That's also a great big unknown that can cause us to have some self-doubt about assessing what we want to do. And the things that we've been through that were either really deeply impactful, like say a car accident or losing someone in an intense event or situation. It could be a one-time thing that goes really, really deep and can last us for days or weeks or years, or it can be something chronic that we've been through over and over again, such as difficult dynamics in the home, or if we've lost a job several times. So it can work both ways. And in either case, one of the premises of our teaching on a spiritual basis is no matter what your dynamics have been, you can learn to direct these processes slowly and ultimately change your thinking and change your life. So what if we, with this awareness, choose to aim for love over our fear? Is love really a choice? Well, the answer to that is yes and no, because of the complexity that goes into love. Love is the tie that binds. It also, like fear, has a primitive origin and is absolutely necessary for our survival. Human beings are intended to be communal. We're intended to be attached, especially because when our babies are born, they do not have the ability to care for themselves. So that when we come into the world, the most important thing to happen for us, first thing, is that we become attached to our caregivers. And that very primary programming carries through with us through all the phases of our life, because we're not intended to be on this earth by ourselves. We're intended to be with a community or tribe or family. And so love is mediated by also several different kinds of chemicals, in the same way that fear is, only there are different chemicals. There's oxytocin that promotes relaxation and receptiveness and the desire to be caring. Vasopressin promotes vigilance and protectiveness in the emotional mobilization. And these states are not static. They're always changing depending on what's going on and what kind of input we have with our senses. And so she's going to give a couple of examples in the next few slides of the difference between what our body does, whether we're being open, which is on the side of love, or whether we're contracted, which is feeling protective and in response to fear. And if a person has come through life not ever really feeling loved, then that is a foundation for some very challenging problems with relationships and so forth moving forward. So we are beings of mind, body, and spirit. You hear that in Centers for Spiritual Living all the time. And to be able to have this particular perspective on it is very, very powerful, because it brings it all together into a working picture that you can then apply in your daily living. We're much more than just our bodies. We have all this biochemistry going on, and that's true. But our bodies are vehicles for our spirit and soul. And the mind that we use is universal mind, and it filters through our brains. So we have our universal mind, which is of our spirit and soul, and then that's being operated through our brains here on this, in this dimension, in this experience being on Earth. And so as an immortal soul, we're temporarily housed here with our brains, and we are perfect expressions of Spirit, our Creator, which is the source of all our good. And all of this is intended to work together for our good. And part of what we're doing here, I believe, looking at life as a spiritual classroom, is learning how to do that. We're learning how to navigate this dimension, living in a body with all of this different kind of stuff going on, and having an earthly experience while at the same time we're actually eternal expressions of the one Spirit. And love is the energy we receive from our Creator all the time. Spirit is always giving, always open. And it's an exchange that goes both giving and receiving. Spirit is open to what we're putting out there as a directive, and Spirit is open to bringing us all the love and all the source of good possibly need. And when we are in relationship with others, it's happening at all three levels at the same time. It's happening in spirit, it's happening within the law of creation, and it's happening on this bodily level that we've been talking about. In expression, love is every positive encounter that we have with other people. And it is the act of kindness that doesn't have an expectation of something coming back or a reward. The kind of love is, this kind of love is always given from a place of choice. It's not given from a place of expectation or sacrifice. For those who are habitually loving, they have chosen that as a habit. And so here are some examples. You wouldn't necessarily think of something like this as being loving, but in fact, every exchange that we are that is open and mutually intended to help people feel supported, help people feel appreciated and loved, is an act of love. So here's just some more examples of just being helpful generally in your everyday life. And this is true. We need this kind of support and love for each other regardless of our age. So even though love and fear are operating like simultaneously, understanding what it is that makes them experienced as opposites can be very, very helpful. When we're in love, we have the ability to feel open, we're more relaxed, and we're able to share honestly, and that can feel like we're being exposed. And when we're in fear, then we're retracted, we're closed up, and we're defending, we're protecting. And what's true, it's not possible to do both of those at the same time. A system is either in growth, which is opening, or in protection, which is retracted and getting smaller and smaller. And so you might notice in your own life, there are times when you're feeling more open, you're feeling more creative, you're feeling more on your leading edge, and then it seems like that's never going to end. It's just like everything's going in that direction, and that's the direction it's going to keep going. And then there are times, if we get sick, or if we get depressed, or if life comes along with a number of different challenges at the same time, then we start to close up. We start not to feel like we have that extra energy, and we may even retract from our most closest relationships, and we may, spend time just feeling like we just want to go to bed and put the covers over our head. And that's a very natural response. And when we do that, then it also feels like that's not ever going to end. It just feels like, we can't get started in the other direction again. And Wendy has here, experiencing fear from someone or some situation makes it impossible to feel love for them in that same moment. And that's that understanding that it's not possible to do both of these states at the same time. We're either in one state or the other. And so just here's some physical expressions. You can almost even feel this just by doing it. Here, you're open, your hands and your heart and your mind are open. And then when something happens and we pull back, we tend to do this. Just another example, and you can kind of read this kind of thing in people's body language. Fear gets in the way of living. Most of our fear these days is about things that aren't actually going to threaten us to the level of being killed anymore at all. And yet we still tend to operate from that very primal level. And it tends to put us on guard when we've had a lot of things that we have felt were going to be threatening in the past. And we say to ourselves, be careful, don't be taken in, watch out. And there's a term there that most people are familiar with, like hypervigilant, like we're always looking for the other shoe to drop. And while you may not actually be in physical danger, you certainly could be at risk for something emotionally or financially or professionally in the environments that we live in today. And so it's about how to balance those things. And projections that we're going to be hurt again, making the assumption that because something happened to us in the past, it's going to happen again, is one of the things that tends to keep us feeling like we have to remain hypervigilant, even when the things that have happened are long past. And so it's about finding that balance. So we need to have our eyes open, but practice being able to hold our arms open wide is the balance. So then the question becomes, if the primal brain is looking for safety first, how do we do that? When people have been hurt, it's not easy to trust. And some people will tend to see the best in people even when they have been hurt. And so then their shutters are too far open. And one of the things that I talk with people a lot about is that those shutters, of whether we're open or closed, doesn't have to be either I'm completely closed or I'm completely open. We can moderate those shutters depending on the actual situation. And Wendy has here, living and loving fearlessly, life requires a whole lot of trust. And so then the first question is, when we say that life requires trust in order to be open, what are we trusting? It's not about trusting the other person. It's not about trusting someone else. It's about developing your relationship with yourself and coming to trust yourself. Because when we have ourself, then we're not as easily set up to be disappointed by other people, because the other people in our lives can change all the time. But it doesn't pull the rug out from under us as deeply when that hasn't been our primary dependence. If I have myself and I know that I can find another resource, I can find another connection, if someone fails me or leaves me or dies, then it's that foundation of trusting ourselves is part of where it begins. There is an abundance of love in the world for all of us. Every person on earth deserves to be loved. You and your Creator are designing a beautiful, loving life for yourself right now. You're just starting from where you are, and as you learn what works, you can do more of it. You have the strength and the resilience to recover from any emotional hurt you may have experienced. And a part of that is also about getting to know yourself, because all of us not only have had unique experiences, but those experiences have impacted all of us differently. So it's about, from within you, taking information like this and saying, how did I feel? And where are the gaps still today? What did I need and what do I need today about the things that have hurt us? And so now she has some information on what makes people resilient. Resilient people are aware of their own reactions and the behaviors of others in the situation. Resilient people expect challenges. When we're in defense and protection, we want to say, I'm going to avoid that challenge. I'm just not going to go there, because we don't feel like we have the resilience to deal with it. And so a part of being able to open is to come to know that we have the resilience and the flexibility to be able to deal with a challenge, rather than trying to say, I just need that not to happen, because challenges are going to happen in life. Resilient people believe their actions affect outcomes and take ownership of the state of their lives. Resilient people have good problem-solving skills, identifying solutions in a crisis. Now, this doesn't mean that if you get into a situation, you're just supposed to automatically know your own answer. What it does mean is that if you don't know, you can find someone who does to help you. And that gets into the whole paradigm of being willing to ask for help, and that's all part of it. Anytime you have a question about a situation and you're recognizing, I don't know what to do, I haven't ever been through this before, it's about saying, I don't know, but I will find someone who does, and I'll be willing to say, this is where I'm at. Can you share from your experience? Can you help me? And then that's what she has there at the bottom. And because we are beings who need a circle of support that is flexible and strong and has many moving pieces to it, having good social connections is really, really a beautiful thing. And not just to need people when, when something's going on, but maintaining strong relationships all the time, so that we can share both when we're on the high side and when we're feeling really loving, and we can come to someone and say, oh, I just want to be with you today. I'm so happy and I want to share my joy with you. And then also we have that connection there. If we do need help, we can reach out and say, today I'm struggling and can you help me with this? Brene Brown says, connection is why we're here. It's what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives. And Brene Brown is a phenomenal resource, and Wendy did recommend looking up Brene Brown's. She has lots of information out on YouTube and so forth, and I would agree with that. You can just look her up, and there's many things that she has recorded you can just listen to, and books and so forth you could get. Now, about the power of vulnerability. When we hear that word vulnerability, we tend to sometimes want to retract right away because it's uncomfortable. We don't want to feel overexposed. We don't want to feel at risk. But here's the thing. Meaningful connections require a willingness to be vulnerable. And once you begin developing the ability to be comfortable with what's called vulnerability, then you can be more wholehearted. And it's a pretty amazing thing. As we discover how to allow ourselves to feel safer being vulnerable by asking ourselves, what would I need? What would I need to be able to open my hand rather than have it closed? Then the other thing that happens with that is the messages that we've had in the past that we have to be perfect to be safe begin to start to fall away. And it's kind of, you know, those two things kind of go together. The more we don't feel safe, the more perfect we think the world has to be in order to stay safe. And when we start finding out that we can relax some, we can slowly open our shutters, then what sort of naturally starts to begin to happen as well is we find out today the world doesn't have to be perfect, and we don't have to be perfect in it to still be safe. Vulnerable people have compassion for others, and they form connection based on authenticity, being able to be real in the moment and just say what works for them and doesn't work for them. They embrace who they really are rather than who they think that other people think they should be or that they think they should be. But people who can be vulnerable believe they are worthy of love, and that's another state that kind of develops naturally as you start to loosen some of this up. You start to realize that you're worthy because you are, and it's not about how perfect you are or how adapted you are to various environments. It's just that you are. And people who are comfortable with vulnerability see being vulnerable as necessary rather than something to avoid. And when we don't think that we can embrace vulnerability, it tends to go back to a feeling of shame. And this is another point that she brought up that I really resonate with, and I can attest to. When we've had things happen to us that we had no control over, that were overwhelming and painful, and thusly made us feel like we need to go like this, innately within that primal programming, there's wiring that says there should have been something I could do about it. And I wasn't able to do it. So I am powerless. And that can be one thing that can bring shame into the way it feels to the things that have been the most challenging in our lives. And shame is a universal experience, but for some it is crippling. And that would be there again, if you've had things happen, if it was a one-time event that you just, you know, was so pervasive that it's almost impossible to feel like you can get over. It's not impossible, but it does take support. And that's what she's talking about. For some people, it can be crippling. And there again, it can be a one-time event or something that's happened over and over again. For those who do not believe they are worthy, vulnerability is excruciating because you do feel exposed and you don't feel safe. And so if you're a person that finds yourself in that kind of position, that when you think about vulnerability, it's just impossible, that's where you start with the question, what would I need to feel safer? What would I need to begin to feel safe enough to be able to go from this to just a little bit of this, and allow yourself to take it slowly? And by all means, this does call for support. And this is just information that we're offering here. If you do need support, see about getting support from someone who is trained for therapy or for psychological support. And the practitioners would be happy to help you with that. One of the things that people do to avoid things, that's part of what drives addictive behavior, is that if we have something that's hurting and we don't know what to do about it, we'll try to numb it with the use of drugs, food, or alcohol. And sometimes spending. In the moment you spend it, it feels good, and then after you do it feels horrible. And pretending the things that they do don't affect others, or that their lives are what you see on Instagram or Pinterest. And the point she was making there is that in a snapshot, you can make anything look the way you want it to look, but then that's one way to avoid actually letting the world around us know that we're hurting and we need help. So vulnerability is essential to connection. And this is just kind of a recap of that. And so this is a slide about how to be vulnerable but not afraid. And these are some goals. If you are in a place of wanting to start something new, give yourself time to use your cognitive side and really think about it before you just jump and react to something. Use your spiritual tools, pray and meditate. about what you're thinking of giving a try, and then ask in spirit to be guided by love rather than your fears, and asking as your fears come up there again, what do I need in order not to feel afraid? And practice refusing to expect disaster. When you find yourself projecting that something is going to go the same way that maybe it did in the past, just stop yourself. Take that pausing breath. Just say, that was then, this is now. And I'm choosing a new now. And everything comes to an end. Our challenges ultimately come to an end, and the good things in our life ultimately come to an end. Every relationship we have, except for the relationship to ourselves, will ultimately, one way or another, come to an end. And our society has habitually rather been afraid of those kinds of endings, and thusly not, it feels like, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to open my heart so wide and be so in a loving situation with someone, knowing it's not going to last forever? But nothing lasts forever. And that preciousness of knowing that we embrace it in the moment and we embrace it to its fullest, and then we let it be. The thing is that life is continually cycling around. So yes, relationships come to an end. And with every new creation, with every newborn being, we have the opportunity to embrace it even more and deeper and better. Open your heart and let love pour out and wash the fear away. So I just finished the PowerPoint, and I wanted to share the song by John Denver, but then I realized we have a publication problem. So I'm not going to add the song to the end of the PowerPoint. I'm going to end this with an affirmative prayer about what we've been talking about. So first, I take that pausing breath, allowing my system the opportunity to create the space to find the balance between my mind and my use of mind through my brain and my emotions. And in this moment, I consciously choose. And I choose recognizing the one life that is the omnipresent divine source of all creation. There is no other. One essence, one love, one law, all working together for this continuous paradoxical experience we have of oneness and multiplicity that we call life. Recognizing this truth consciously right now, I am one with it, as is each person within the sound of my voice, unified in mind, heart, and soul. And from this alignment, I realize in my experience right now that the benefits of this presentation and the pearls that it offers reach those who can be served by it, and that there is the opening of doors and windows, not only for those people who partake of this right here and right now, but for people who are seeking, that because this information is out there, that they find like a spiritual antenna that they have up in looking for themselves, that they either find this presentation along the way, or they find the essence of what is here through other forms and other means and other ways. And I know absolutely that as we are open to the gifts that Spirit has to give, that those gifts come to us in plain English just for the asking, simply to be stepped into. For in fact, it is already there at the level of the law. Every good thing, every potential experience already exists in God. And it is only for us to be in the learning process, the learning of how to balance this knowing that we are the fullness of Spirit expressing in human form, and how to engage all of the relationships with openness and with being able to use the shutters and the ability to choose and have ourselves set at a level that it is all right to trust the process. And for this knowing, for this time, for this opportunity, I am so grateful. Thank you, thank you, thank you, presence of life. I just release it, I let it be, and so it is. Thank you, everybody.